this crack. The one you've probably seen all over the internet. It looks like Africa is tearing itself apart. But it's not what you think, because this isn't how a continent breaks. Not suddenly, not violently, not in a single moment you can point to. And that's exactly why it's so easy to misunderstand. July 2025, northern Ethiopia. A dark plume rises above the volcano Erta Ale. From orbit, the image looks quiet, almost indifferent. No chaos, no urgency, just a thin column of ash dissolving into the atmosphere. But that stillness is misleading, because beneath that image, the ground is moving, stretching, cracking, slowly pulling itself apart, not metaphorically, physically. And it has been doing so for millions of years. So here's the real question. Is Africa actually splitting apart right now? Or are we completely misunderstanding what we're looking at? We tend to think of continents as permanent, solid, stable, finished. We build cities, roads, entire systems of life, as if the ground beneath us is fixed, unchanging, reliable. But in East Africa, that assumption doesn't hold, because this isn't just a single crack in the earth. It's a system, a vast rift stretching roughly 3,000 kilometers from the Red Sea all the way down through East Africa. A structure so large that it reshapes landscapes across entire countries. And at its northern edge lies one of the most unusual places on the planet, the Afar Depression. Here, three tectonic plates meet: the Arabian Plate, the Nubian Plate, and the Somali Plate. They're not locked together, they're drifting apart, slowly, but continuously, and with enormous force. Here's where perception starts to fail us. The plates are separating at just a few millimeters, sometimes centimeters per year. That sounds insignificant, almost trivial, but geology doesn't operate on human timescales. A few millimeters a year becomes meters over thousands of years, kilometers over millions. And over enough time, entire continents are reshaped. So yes, Africa is splitting, but not like glass shattering, not like a sudden rupture tearing across the land. More like a process unfolding in increments too small to feel, but too large to stop. And that leads to the next misunderstanding. People imagine this as a single dramatic event, a giant crack racing across the land, swallowing roads, splitting cities, something fast, visible, immediate. But that's not how it works. Most of the time, nothing visible happens at all. Stress builds silently beneath the surface. Rock bends, pressure accumulates, invisible forces working over vast spans of time. And then, occasionally, something breaks. But even that isn't always what it seems. Because in places like Afar, it's not just tectonic force doing the work, it's magma. Molten rock rising from deep within the earth, forcing its way into fractures in the crust. This process is called a dike intrusion. And when it happens, the ground doesn't simply crack open. It gets pushed apart from the inside, lifted, stretched, forced outward. In 2005, this process became impossible to ignore. Over the course of just a few days, a massive fracture opened in the Afar region, up to 60 kilometers long, several meters wide. By geological standards, it was incredibly fast. But even this wasn't a sudden, isolated event. It was the visible release of pressure that had been building for years. Magma had moved upward, the crust had thinned, and eventually, it gave way. Now return to the present. The activity observed around Erta Ale in 2025, gas emissions, ash plumes, surface collapse, and signs of magma movement beneath the rift, all point to the same thing. This system is not dormant, it's active, right now. So if that's true, why does the continent still look whole? Why isn't there a massive visible split stretching across Africa? The answer is simple. We're looking at the wrong scale. Human perception is built for seconds, minutes, years. Geology operates in thousands, millions, even tens of millions of years. A few millimeters per year don't register, but the land is changing, right beneath us. Faults shift. Blocks of crust tilt and drop. Rift valleys deepen. Volcanoes align along zones of weakness. Lakes slowly fill, subsiding basins. Each change is small, almost imperceptible. But together, they form a pattern. A continent gradually reorganizing itself. To understand why this is happening, we have to go deeper. Far below the surface, beneath the crust, lies the mantle. And beneath East Africa, there is strong evidence of unusually hot material rising upward. Not violently, not suddenly, but persistently, over immense spans of time. This upwelling heat weakens the lithosphere, the rigid outer shell of the Earth. It makes it thinner, more flexible, more vulnerable to being pulled apart. At the same time, tectonic forces are slowly moving the plates, so what you get is a combination of effects. Heat from below, tension from the sides, and weaknesses within the crust itself. Together they create the conditions for rifting, a process that, once it begins, can continue for millions of years. What makes this region extraordinary is that we can actually see it happening. Most of the time, new ocean basins form underwater, hidden beneath kilometers of ocean. But here, in East Africa, the process is exposed, visible, unfolding in real time. The Afar region, in particular, is often described as transitional. Not fully continental, not yet oceanic, a place where one type of crust is gradually becoming another. That's incredibly rare. It's like watching the earliest stages of an ocean being born. Not in a sudden event, but in slow motion. And this is where myth starts to take over. You've probably seen the headlines. Africa is splitting in two. A new ocean is forming right now. The continent could break apart suddenly. It's compelling, it spreads quickly, but it's misleading. There is no scientific evidence that East Africa will suddenly split open in the near future. No overnight transformation, no instant coastline. What the evidence actually shows is something much slower and more complex. Rifting happens in cycles. Long periods of quiet, where stress builds beneath the surface, followed by bursts of activity, magma intrusions, fault movements, volcanic eruptions, then silence again, not because the process has stopped, but because it's resetting, preparing for the next phase. Over millions of years, those phases add up. If the current process continues, the Somali Plate, which includes much of East Africa, will gradually move away from the rest of the continent. And eventually, a new ocean basin could form in between. Water may flow in from the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean. And what is now inland terrain could become coastline. But this is not something that happens in our lifetime, or even in the lifetime of civilizations. This is deep time. So why does any of this matter now? Because even slow geological processes have real consequences. Rifting influences earthquakes. It drives volcanic activity. It reshapes entire landscapes. And in some places, it creates real risks for the people living there. Ground instability, surface fractures, localized gas emissions. These aren't global disasters, but they are real, and they are happening. So return to that original image, the massive crack, the one that looks like the continent is tearing itself apart. It feels dramatic, but it's only a fragment, a misleading one. Africa is not suddenly breaking apart, but it is changing. Right now, quietly, relentlessly, and that might be the most important part, because the most powerful forces shaping this planet don't need speed. To be unstoppable, we just don't notice them, until occasionally, the Earth leaves a mark on the surface that forces us to look again. And when you do, the ground beneath your feet doesn't feel quite as permanent anymore.